Thank you. I think everybody has met everybody, but Mary Lynn, maybe not met everybody, but two of my very precious classmates, 60 years ago, we graduated. Karen and Mary Lynn. I guess I shouldn't have said that. I had to give away our ages. So, but a lot of fond members of Somerset. Good people out here, still good people out here, still making unbelievably good news on the news for the Somerset High School. So it says a lot for the city of Somerset. I graduated in '62, and not too long after I graduated, my best friend Leon, he went in the Navy in October, I think. So wasn't too much longer that Bobby Stamer and myself decided we better go jump in too. So the reason I joined the Air Force, I had two brothers in World War II in the Army Air Force, and four brothers retired from the Air Force after that. So 6 of us served in the military, all but one. Arthur didn't serve in the Air Force, and he passed away in July. There's still 5 of us left in my family. Bernice and Beatrice, here is the only 2 girls left, and I've got Edmund and O'Daniel are still alive. O'Daniel's in Utah, and Edmund's in a nursing home in San Antonio. He's 96. They just celebrated their 70th wedding anniversary. So, after I graduated and went to basic training at Lackland, which was not too much of a chore, I went to Denver, Colorado to go to nuclear weapons school to study. I started on the weapon for the Titan I missile system, and I went through with 4 other classmates at the time, and we all got transferred to Ellsworth, because Ellsworth had just started deploying the Minuteman missile system, and they had 150 missiles that we had to get put in as soon as we could get them put in. I mean, it was a very dynamic time in the country's history, right after the Cuban Missile Crisis and a lot of things going on at that time. But they were in a hurry to get the Minuteman put in. And we worked day and night. I mean, there was no time for off-duty education and things like that. You went to work, sometimes you got home in 24 hours, sometimes you got home in 72 hours. So it's ever how many warheads and guidance packages we could take out to put on the missiles, that's what we did. After I'd been there about a little over a year, we ran, after Christmas of '64, we ran out of guidance packages, so we couldn't take any warheads out to lay them on the missile. So they said, if you want to take leave, you can go for 6 days, because in 6 days we're getting the packages in. So my roommate, Bob Dirksen from Cincinnati, very good friend, still a good friend today, even though what he did to me. But he said, I'm gonna go home to Cincinnati, you wanna go with me? I said, sure, I'll go with you. So we piled, 3 of us piled in the car and headed out, icy roads. I mean, it was solid ice all the way. But we got there, we drove all night, and Bob had a friend that lived in the Y there, and he called her and told her, says, I'm bringing my friend, so fix him up with a date. So she said, okay. So we got there, so we go down to the Y, waiting for the elevator doors to open, and every time somebody would get out, I'd ask him, is that them? No. Is that them? No. Finally, 2 of the most beautiful women I've ever seen in my life got off the elevator. I said, is that them? Surely that's not them. She said, yep, that's them. And Janet was one of the 2. That's when I met with Janet. It was the 27th of December, I believe it was, 1964. I think we saw each other two nights while we were there, or 2 days while we were there. And we didn't see each other again until August of the following year, but all that time, it was letters and occasional phone calls. But that's how I met Janet, and that's 18 months later, we got married after we seen each other about 5 days. So it was a long distance, it was a blind date. been blind ever since. But I love you. And I still like Bob Dursey. Right after that, that was right before that, matter of fact, I got a phone call one Sunday night saying, from my team chief, saying that one of the warheads was not on top of the missile anymore. That's all he said. I tried to get him to give me more information. He wouldn't do it. He says, get a van, go down, get a semi and bring it out with the equipment, because that was the only way we could get down into the hole where the missile and the warhead was. The equipment that we had on our vehicles. So I gathered up one more team member, went down, hooked up the van to the tractor, and we headed out. It was snowing, ice on the roads, and we were trying to make as good a time as we could. And finally I saw red lights behind me, and a state trooper pulled us over. He says, "Y'all seem to be in an awful hurry." He said, "But you got smoke coming out of your right truck on the trailer." So we found out that there was an air line that was loose on the tractor, and fixed that, and it was off on our way. But he didn't ask any other questions. He just made that one comment, we didn't answer it. So that's how we get it. Anyway, we get to this missile site about 10 o'clock at night, I guess. And we get the silo is down in the equipment rooms. There's 2 floors down below the entryway. And then you gotta get a work cage in that goes around the inside of the tube and up and down. And so we get to install that, and the team chief comes over and he says, "I need you to go down and check the weapon." I was a little surprised because the EOD guys who are responsible for that was supposed to do it, but they had never trained on that system. It was brand new. They had a legitimate excuse for not training on it. Anyway, I was the only one there that knew how to do what we needed to do, so I did it. So I took an EOD guy with me. We went down and checked the warhead to find out. I wasn't too much worried about the warhead as I was that missile, because I didn't know what kind of shape the missile was when the warhead went down inside, because it bounced off that missile twice. And it didn't hit either of the interstages, the bearings. If it had hit one of those, it would have weakened the missile and it could have collapsed. And if that missile had collapsed, then it would have been a problem. It would have blown up. But anyway, we went down, all the fairings were in good shape, so that relieved me anyway. And the weapon, the only reason the weapon could be in a dangerous situation is nuclear weapons are as safe as they can be. They're the safest weapon in the world. It's the only thing, there's physical proximity internally to it. If they get too close together, it gets hot. And if it gets too hot, it goes supercritical, and that's when it scatters nuclear material around. Doesn't blow up, it just scatters nuclear material around. But anyway, we found out that wasn't the case. Anyway, we got to get back up, and we walk up to the general who was in charge. They had flown a whole bunch of people in. And he asked the master sergeant, I was a two-strapper at the time, he asked this master sergeant and said, "Well, how are we gonna get it out?" And the master sergeant just kind of looked at it because he didn't have a clue how we were gonna get it out. So I said, "We'll just take our cargo net that we would lower our equipment down into all with, roll it into it, take a crane and pull it out." Yeah. But he looked at me and saw that I only had 2 stripes and said, "Airman, if I want anything from you, I'll ask you for it." I said, "Okay." That was my invitation to go sit in a warm truck. And I did. So the next day, my team chief comes to me and he says, "The general wants to talk to you." I said, I really don't want to talk to him. And he said, "Yeah, you need to go tell him how to get it out." So I went and talked to him. He wanted to know, we had headsets on, talking, everything was recorded at SAC headquarters. Everything that was going on, all the conversations was recorded. So I explained to him again how to get it out, or my idea about how to get it out. And the people at SAC headquarters, they said, "Okay, give us a few minutes." So they discussed it. They said, "Okay, that sounds like good, but go to the training hole, which was 150 miles away, and practice this with the training warhead." So with that, we killed another 2 days practicing getting that weapon down in the hole and pulling it out with a cargo net. So we did that, came back, pulled it out just like it was supposed to. And then he come to me again and says, Airman Hicks, I need you to drive that truck back to the base with the damaged warhead on it. Since the EOD guys don't know how to drive that truck. So, okay, not a problem. So I drove it back. And I didn't think it was a big problem. I mean, I didn't see it as, I didn't even tell Janet that when I saw her, because I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I had been trained, I knew what I was doing, so we did what we needed to do. But later on, I got recognized with a decoration of medal for acts of courage, which is kind of unusual. But anyway, that was that story. Since then, the newspaper just recently, in 2017, the newspaper reporter up there heard about it and wanted me to come up and help him do a newspaper article, which I did. And then just a couple of months ago, I got a call from PBS out of South Dakota, wanted to do a short video on it, so I did that. So the publicity really has come like 55 years later in South Dakota. Nobody knew about that outside the Air Force. I mean, it wasn't classified, it was never classified, but the Air Force just doesn't talk about those things. None of the military branches do. So anyway, that's how that went. In 1965, the maintenance superintendent convinced me that if at the time, I was gonna get out. I'm not gonna stay in the Air Force. He says, Bob, they don't sell nuclear weapons at Sears, so where are you gonna get a job? And so he convinced me to go to EOD. EOD is a school taught by the Navy. They're the executive agency in Maryland. And you learn how to disarm, save, and dispose of all conventional, chemical, and nuclear weapons. We first had to go through the Army Chemical School at Fort McClellan, Alabama, to learn saving chemical weapons, inventing chemical weapons, things like that. I think I lost 10 pounds there because it was in August and we were in butyl rubber suits. I don't know if you know what, it's a thick rubber suit and it covers your head to toe. And it was in August in Alabama. You can imagine how hot it was. They had fire trucks sitting there spraying us with water while we were working on these bombs. So that's how hot it was. But at the end of the day, my boots were still full of water. So EOD school was a tough school. Nuclear weapons school, when I got to nuclear weapons school in Colorado, the first block of school was physics. We didn't have much physics in Somerset. I was lost. So between Bob Nursing, who had a couple of years of college, and the instructor, they got me through that first block. And after that, it was easy going. But in EOD school, it was memory work. You learn every fuse, every bomb, every missile, and every nuclear weapon from the United States, Germany, France, Italy, and Japan, and some Russian ordnance that they had captured. But anyway, you had to identify all those fuses, which were hundreds, what kind of fuse it was, how to get it, how to save it, and how to dispose of it. So it was a very intense training, pretty much like the nuclear weapons training was, but it was something that I did not know I was capable of doing it until after I'd done it. I just never applied myself at school, as Karen and Marilyn could probably attest. I wasn't a real great A student. I think I was number 26 out of 27. I'm serious. I wasn't a very good student. I didn't pay that much of attention, except in ag. In ag, I did. That's where I excel. I didn't do sports because I weighed 98 pounds, and as a freshman, I think, and I never was over about 5'5". anyway, the first assignment out of, EOD school was to, Goose Bay, Labrador. And we got married in June.
We got married in May.
I got married in May, and in June, I went to Goose Bay, Labrador. That was the first assignment. After EOD school, I found out how cold it is. It's right across from Greenland, if you can imagine how far north in Canada that is. But when it supported the interceptor aircraft that intercepted the Russian Boer aircraft that would cross into airspace for the United States there. After that, I came back to Little Rock, Arkansas, where we had the B-58s and the Titan II ICBMs. Didn't stay there long until I got an assignment to Guam during the Vietnam War. Guam was a very interesting assignment. Every B-52, and there were about 50 a day, B-52s loaded with 108 bombs, took off from Guam to Vietnam. We had to recover, EOD had to recover every one of those aircraft, because most of them would come back with 1, 2, 3, or a half a dozen bombs that the actuators worked, but it wasn't enough to release the bomb. So whenever they would land, those bombs would then release onto the doors of the aircraft and slide into the wheel wells when they hit their brakes. So we had to pull every one of those bombs out, defuse them, cable them up to where they could open the doors to get them out of the aircraft. We did that every day for 2.5 years and never had an explosive accident on Guam. Everybody on the EOD team was dive qualified. We could dive. Our off-duty time, that's where we stayed. It was in the water, scuba diving. But anyway, we had an aircraft go off of the runway straight into the ocean, and about a quarter mile off of Patty Point. There, it was a deep set side of the island. So we had about 8 days later, we went up and dove down to make sure that the seats, whenever they pulled the bodies out of the seats, or we pulled the bodies out of the seats, that they wouldn't actuate. I didn't think that there was too much chance of it happening, but still, they wanted just safety, insisted that they be checked and pinned before they pulled the bodies up. Not a fun experience. That was one of the dark days of my career. Well, I was on Guam. That's when I lost my dad, and Janet lost her dad. Same time, the day that she was supposed to be coming to Guam, her dad passed away. So I flew back for his funeral and took her back with me then. After I got back from Guam, I went to Omaha, Nebraska. We were in the terminal. Our bags had already been loaded on the aircraft, and we were supposed to be going to Shreveport, Louisiana, to Barksdale Air Force Base. And the executive officer for the squadron came running in the door and said, "Bob, SAC headquarters wants to know if you'll come to the headquarters at Offutt and be on the MSET team." Well, the MSET team is a team that goes worldwide to all the SAC bases, evaluating maintenance practices for every person that touches a weapon system, be it B-52s, missiles, or whatever. But they evaluate everybody in the world, every SAC base in the world, and there's a bunch of them. So it took us, we had to make a decision in like 5 minutes. We decided, yep, and all our furniture had already been shipped to Shreveport. So we get to Omaha, and SAC headquarters, or SAC, the command, Strategic Air Command, they treated their people pretty well. So whenever that furniture got to Barksdale, they loaded it on a 135, KC-135, and flew it to Omaha. So we got our furniture in fairly quickly. So, but the traveling there, that's when I really started traveling. I was out a week We'd leave on Sunday afternoon, we'd come back in Friday afternoon. Every other week of the year, sometimes it continues 2 weeks in a row. But it was a very, very rewarding career. You think you know a lot until you're put in charge of evaluating somebody else. And that's when you get your nose into the books and find out everything there is in there. So, and then at the time there was not a tech order for the B-52. So that I spent time at Boeing, Wichita, writing a manual, or just for the B-52 to remove all the ordnance. At about the time that my assignment there, 5 years, it was before almost 5 years, I got a call from the OSI office, Office of Special Investigations, wanting me to come out and look at an aircraft, an E-3A. It was a command aircraft out of Washington. It was something that they didn't recognize that was on that airplane, so they wanted me to look at it before they let anybody on the airplane. So I went and looked at it, made sure it was not anything dangerous. And then a couple of weeks later, the same guy called me. He says, "Let's go have lunch." So he made a pitch to me then to cross-train into OSI. It's a federal investigative agency for the Air Force. It does the same thing the FBI did. As a matter of fact, the FBI started it years ago. So I was in a volunteer career field, so you could quit. All you had to do is pull your volunteer statement. And I had to do that because they wanted to go to the site when they let me go. So I pulled a volunteer statement, got an assignment to the school. School was in Washington, D.C., downtown. And it was a new experience. Another tough school. First block there was a law block. And that's, you learn law pretty thoroughly as it applies to the military especially. After graduating that, I came here to San Antonio to the Defense Investigative Service in running background investigations. In the end, they called me and wanted to know, asked me if I would go to Tehran, Iran. That was in 78. And of course, I said, yeah, I'll go. They wanted me to replace the guy that was a technical agent, which I said, I'll go, but you got to send me to the technical agent school. They wanted me to go because I was my EOD background for Tehran, but since it was a tech agent, I wanted to go to the tech agent school before I went. It's run by the CIA and it's off-site out in the farms out in Maryland. And there you learn tech agents do two things. They sweep buildings to make sure there's no listening devices on them. And that's half the job. The other half is to support body wires, hidden cameras, telephone systems, anything to collect evidence on criminal activity. But the other side is looking for bugs in secure facilities. That was a tough school, but that was the toughest school because it was taught at the engineering level. We had engineers in there that had a tough time getting through it. So, but the one guy that stayed with me till 9 o'clock almost every night, we got through that school. And it led to very interesting assignments. First assignment out of that, I came back here to San Antonio. Worked a lot of criminal jobs, large dope trafficking, theft, murder cases, solicitation to commit murder, in that type of case. Left here in 78 and went to Washington, D.C. to our headquarters where I taught. I was in charge of teaching all the new tech agents for the OSI. They didn't have a photography course, and I recognized that right away, and I even do it here. I was not a photographer. So I went down to the FBI Academy down at Quantico. I said, is there any chance that you would let me go through your school your photography school to where I could start my own classes up at Boeing? And they said, yes, yeah, for sure. So I took our command photographer with me, and he helped me set up the school and the dark rooms and everything. And we started teaching probably the best photography course that OSI has ever had. I mean, the final exercise that I had was people had to take a picture at noon and take a picture at midnight of the same location, and you had to make them look alike. So photography is the ability to measure light. If you can measure light, you can take a photograph of anything, anywhere, especially with black and white, because you can work with it. Color you can't work with, but black and white you can work with. But anyway, after 3 years, and also after a while, about halfway through my 4-year assignment there, 3-year assignment, they put me in the operations arena where anytime that anybody wanted to do any kind of wire intercept of any sort, it had to be approved by the general counsel for the Air Force. So they would send it in to me. I would write the request to the general counsel, get our general to sign off on it, and I would take it to the general counsel, and they would approve it. We had a single contact over there. She was an amazing lady, very smart, very aggressive, understood operational activity and what it meant. And she would sign off on it, and then we would do the operation. But we had to have her approval, or the general counsel approval, on every operation that we did, of that type that we did. After that, I went to Wiesbaden, Germany. That was started off interesting. It was about 30 days after we got there, the USAFE headquarters, United States Air Force forces in Europe, headquarters at Ramstein got bombed by the Red Army faction. So for the next year, there was a team of us that went throughout Europe. We had to train every general and admiral assigned anywhere in Europe. We had to train them, their wives, and their children. We had to inspect their homes, train them how to safe themselves in their homes, how to safe themselves in their offices, how to do route surveys and what to look for, how to set up duress signals between, like, if a general's gonna leave to go home, he would call his wife before he got home, says, what are you having for, one of them, we didn't tell them how to set up their codes or anything, but one told us, he said, what I do, I call my wife, ask her what's for dinner, and if she says spinach, I know there's something wrong at that house. So they were very innovative. I mean, I've had 4-star generals down on the floor with me going over maps on how to get back, best way to get back and forth to where they're going on a daily routine, how to set up, varying their times. But it was that happened right after, I don't know if you remember General Dozier. He was an Army general that got captured in Italy. And so that's where we started, was in Italy. The guy that they went to an Air Force general's house first, General Cooney, who came back here after he retired at USAA. But anyway, they went to his house first. They were acting as plumbers, and his wife turned him away, wouldn't let him in the house. Went to the General Dozier's house, and she let him in, and that's when they kidnapped him. After we took General Cooney back down with us, and we were just riding with him on the same airplane. He was it was his little T-39 that we flew down there on, and he said, well, if there's not Carabinieri there to pick me up, y'all are going home with me. So we figured Carabinieri would be there. So no, Carabinieri was not. We didn't have any guns, we didn't have anything. We were just gonna go down and train. So anyway, we went home with him, went and rented a car, headed out to Alviano to pick up some weapons, and then came back the next day, or went up the next morning and came back same day. Anyway, we trained the generals down there. The day we were getting ready, every afternoon, his wife would call us. She would tell him to call us and find out what they're doing, and they would invite us over every afternoon for wine and cheese. That was every afternoon they did that. Great people, very appreciative of what people do for them. Anyway, the last day we were there, we see these cars pull up in the driveway, and here downstairs, there was one guy on my team, there was three of us. He spoke Italian, so he was listening to what was going on downstairs, and he says, "They're gonna arrest us." And the general says, "Not in my house, they're not gonna arrest you." "Yeah, they're gonna arrest us." So they came up the stairs, we had to pin him back away from them. Said, "You're better here with a telephone than you are with us." So they put us all in a different car with a machine gun operator in the back seat with us, with Uzi, took us down to the jail, and they said, "You guys are carrying guns that are not approved by NATO." So, which was not true. We had just changed guns, but they were still approved by NATO. Anyway, that lasted, there was about 2 hours that we sat there, and they finally come to the room after doing a whole lot of questioning. He says, "Who's the senior guy here?" I says, "I am." He said, "Somebody wants to talk to you." So I went and answered the phone, and it was a friend of mine who had retired from OSI and went to work then for the CIA. And he was there debriefing Dozier. That was the reason he was there. I said, "Okay." Bob said, "What are you doing in jail?" So he said, "You'll be out in 10 minutes. So 10 minutes later, we were out and going back. Got in the car, went back to Aviano, got a flight back to Germany, back home, and to go to a different, I think we were headed then to Holland to train the generals up there. And I saw we did this for a year. This lasted a year process. Every once in a while, I'd be able to go through, going through, and I'd stop maybe long enough to have lunch, sometimes not that long, but it was three of us traveling together. And we did that for a solid year. After that, Berlin is part of the job that we had over there was counter-espionage, spies. And we had American spies that they would defect and go across into East Germany and be recruited by the Russians or the East Germans. So we had a double agent program to where we would train people and send them into East Germany, across into East Berlin. And if they got picked up on by hostile forces, they would cooperate, act like they were willing to be a spy, and they would work with them. I mean, it would be every month or every 3 months they would meet. And our job was to train these people to tell them what to say, how to respond to questions, provide classified material to them that they were asking for that had been declassified just for that purpose. Anyway, that was just a routine thing that we did in Berlin. But finally, one of the hostile intelligence agents asked this one asset that we had, told him that he wanted to give him a device to put into a conference room to record conversations on briefings. Well, that had never happened before. None of the agencies had ever had that happen. So they called me up from Berlin and says, "You need to come up and train him on what questions to ask. How does it have to be installed? What do I have to look for to get as much information about the device as we could before we got the device?" And he was sharp. He was very sharp and understood why we asked the question we asked. So anyway, it finally happened. They gave him a device. He brought it back to West Berlin, brought it to us. I got it before I did anything. I got to the airport. They had Teal Airport in Berlin wired for me to go straight to the airplane. No going through any of the screening devices of any sort, because we did not want that device x-rayed. We didn't want it to go through any of the x-ray machines, because you can trap things to find out if it's been x-rayed before
when you get it back, you can tell, because that's what we used to do. But I left Berlin, went to Frankfurt, got off the airplane, didn't stop. There was a guy waiting for me to take me to the next airplane, put me on it. Flew to JFK, same thing. Got off the airplane, there was a guy waiting for me to put me on another airplane to Washington National. When I got off the airplane, and the first guy I recognized was a CIA guy that ran the school that I went through. He knew me, so he said, I'll go get Bob, because I know him. So he took me to their lab, which they don't take anybody to their lab, because they knew they had to analyze this thing, find out how it operated, find out the frequency it was operating on, and how it was transmitted from the microphone to the recorder that they had given him to record it on. So they did that. I mean, this was like at 11 o'clock at night. I got there, and they had a team ready to go when I got there. By 8 o'clock the next morning, I was on the next flight back to Berlin. Same routine, every airport. I didn't go through any stops, straight through back to Berlin. What we had found out with this device was that it operated on a frequency that we didn't even look for. It was at such a low frequency that our equipment didn't go down that far, and they knew that. I'm sure they knew that. But anyway, it caused the entire intelligence agencies to change the way that they operated, including us. Everybody had to change the way that they looked for devices. Had to go buy new equipment. A lot of them did. We had old equipment that we'd look at, that would go down that far, but the new equipment wouldn't do it. But anyway, that's the way that Berlin operated. It was a hotbed of spies. And it was interesting work. I gotta tell you that it was very interesting work. It was fun work. Counterespionage is a cat and mouse game. Nobody ever gets arrested. Nobody ever gets arrested. You just collect on information to find out what are they looking for to help us protect it. That's the reason we do those things, is just to find out what are they looking for. Because you can arrest a dozen of them, they've got somebody else to take their place. Just like drug dealers. I left Germany in 84, came back here to Randolph. I ran the tech operations division for 10 years. But after I got back, I had scheduled to retire the following September. I had to stay in a year in order to retire, rather than retire at port. But anyway, I got back in July, and I was gonna retire the next September. Well, right after I got back, they called me, the headquarters called me and says, we need an old guy to go undercover. I says, I am getting ready to retire. Says, we'll be done in 6 months. Case won't last over 6 months.
3 years.
So what we did, we set it, the Air Force, the defense suppliers of parts were providing defective parts to the Air Force. And also to commercial airlines too, because they were doing both of them. And what they wanted, what we were tasked to do, we had 12 companies identified that we had bad parts from, that they had certified as being good parts, and they were supposed to be new and unused surplus parts. Like you go to Kelly and buy parts that they don't use, they buy parts for the aircraft out there, and they buy a whole slew. They can't store them all, so they sell them, but they expect the suppliers to keep them operational and turn, actuators turn, things like that, where they can buy them back later. But they buy them in bulk, and they get them back cheaper from the surplus parts. Anyway, that's the way they were saying. We bought these from an auction at Kelly in 1968 or 78 or 88, whatever. Well, we knew they didn't, because we'd go back and check the records at those depots, and they didn't sell those parts. So, plus they were defective. And so our task was, we set up a storefront, had a big warehouse, I went up and we wired the office, there was 2 offices and another storage room beside it. I put all the recording equipment in the storage room beside it, and in the offices themselves, we had it wired to where we recorded video and audio, studio quality. I mean, it was really a good product. But when somebody walked through the door, no matter who they were, all you had to do is hit the hold button on the phone and it would turn everything on. And then the smoke detectors had little LEDs in them. And if that smoke detector LED came on, that meant everything was working. And if it wasn't working, I had to go back and find out why. But it never failed. It worked every single time. Anyway, this 6-month operation turned into 3 years. I was undercover 3 years, longest anybody's been undercover at OSI in history still, hold that record.
Wow.
But at the end of it, we prosecuted 22 companies for selling bad parts to not only the Air Force, but to commercial airlines. The ones for commercial airlines was brake pads, because they could put their stamp on the face of the brake pad, and as soon as they touched the brake the first time, it was gone, so there was no traceability for it. During that period, I think I was on that undercover operation, and since I was already undercover and had all my cover IDs, credit cards, all that in a different name, and I didn't look like somebody that was working for the Air Force, had a beard and kind of scruffy looking. I think that's what you called it, was scruffy. I worked about 4 more undercover operations during that same time, short ones, 2-3 day ones. One, I gotta tell you about this one. Got a call, the Air Force bought some equipment items, and the manufacturer was told to drop ship them. Sent one to every one of the CIA and OSI bought 55 pieces of equipment, and we had 35 of them, and they had the rest. So they drop shipped them, but we had one office that did not get their equipment. So the company one day calls our headquarters and says, we got a phone call from a man in New Orleans wanting to know if they can get the manuals for this equipment. So that alerted us, we knew where that equipment was then. So they called me and says, can you go over and do whatever you gotta do to get that equipment back? So I called the company, told them to send me a check that I could have him, to write to him for the equipment if I had to buy it. If he wasn't willing to give it away, give it back to it, I told him I knew it was stolen from the Air Force, and he could give it back to me and nothing would ever be said about it. Or if you're not willing to do that, I'll buy it from you. And all he had to do was say, I want to sell it to you, and he committed a felony. If he would have given it back to me, it would have been a violation of law. But he offered to sell it to me, and that became a felony. So I said, okay, here's a check. We agreed on the price. He knew it was worth about $10,000 or $12,000 because he had done his research. I said, okay, I'll give you $6,000 for it. He agreed to that. He started out at 12 and we got down to 6. He wrote out, I said, write the check out and I'll sign it. So, cause I wanted his handwriting on that check. And so he filled it out, I signed it, I said, okay, I need you to carry it down and put it in my car because I got a bad back. Let me back up. The night before, on the way over, I stopped at the FBI office and told them what I was in town, what I was doing. They said, okay, do you want somebody to go with you tomorrow? And no, the next day, he said, okay, come in here in the morning before you leave, we'll check this guy out. So anyway, I get a call about 11 o'clock that night saying, we found out who he is, we know all about him. He's about 6'2", weighs about 400 pounds, and he's got big breasts. He was a transvestite. Anyway, I go into the FBI office the next morning, and they said, okay, you wanna take somebody with you? I said, yeah. I told the guy that I'm coming over to visit my niece. I had a niece over in that area, so that's how I thought about it. But anyway, so I told him I was coming to see my niece. Do you have a female agent that can go? And about that time, about a 6-foot-tall blonde walked by. I said, is she an agent? She says, yeah, she's new. She's never done any undercover work before. I said, I don't care. As long as she's got a gun and she can use it, it works. So she went with me. We go to the guy's house and go through the deal about, and they gave me a suitcase or a briefcase, and it had this material stuff, not leather, but tweed material on it. And he had a cat, and that cat would get up on top of that briefcase and scratch on it. Well, I had a recorder in there, recording all these conversations. And I kept knocking that cat out, and he got mad at me for knocking that cat out. So anyway, we finally get done. I said, I need you to take it down, put it in the car, because I got a bad back. He said, well, I got a bad back too. I said, well, if you want to sell this thing, you have to take it down, put it in the car. So we go outside the apartment. It's on the 3rd floor, and it's an outside sidewalk outside. He says, boy, stolen government equipment, you'd think there'd be guys in black suits and all that coming to get it. So we get on the elevator to go down, the elevator door is open, and there's about 5 FBI agents. This is the way he described it, standing there waiting for us. So I said, is that what you're talking about? So we take him to the court. The judge arraigns him, and then the judge calls us up and says, where am I gonna put him? You know, what jail did I put him in? You know? I says, I'm done. I'm out of here. Y'all figured that out. So anyway, I left, and but that was just one of the side jobs that I was doing during that 3-year period. Anyway, after I did go ahead and retire. They had to hire me back because they couldn't get anybody to volunteer to come relieve me. So I stayed on for the full 3 years, and worked with 2 FBI agents, and they were great guys. They were really good agents. They both said if we could transfer to OSI and keep our grades, we'd do it tomorrow. That's how much they respected how the OSI operated. That was in 94. They called me and says, we need somebody to take over the office in Arlington, Texas. It's a fraud, acquisition fraud detachment, where we had Lockheed, E-Systems, Grumman. There was about 5 different defense contractors up there that we were targeting. And so I said, okay. So we go up, build a house, spent 15 months there. And not even, we lived in that house maybe a year. And they said, I got a call one day, says, the vice commander from Washington is coming out to see you tomorrow. I said, what's he coming for? He says, he didn't say. So anyway, he come to, and he's a good friend of mine. I mean, he was here when I was here. I worked with him a lot. Anyway, he come down and he says, we need you to go to Los Angeles and take over the office out there. Because the guy out there that replaced the guy that retired, they were gonna fire him. I mean, he couldn't operate out there. Anyway, he says, let's go talk to Jenny. He wouldn't let me call Jenny. So let's go, I'm going home with you. And she did not want to go. And he knew she did not want to go before he ever got there. So he came down there. Anyway, he says, we go out and sit on the patio, and he starts trying to sell us, and finally she acquiesced. And So that's the closest we ever come to splitting sheets. Anyway, we go out there and did a house hunting trip, and we couldn't believe the price of houses out there. And anyway, we go back out in December of 94, 95. Yeah, 95. Find a condominium, got a good, fair deal. And anyway, I wasn't but about 10 minutes from work, which if you was to drive 90 miles to work, you can get a fairly decent price house. But in Redondo Beach, they're expensive. And I worked in El Segundo, just right down the road. And anyway, there was another very interesting assignment I had. It was the biggest office at OSI. I had normally about 70 agents. But I had offices in Seattle, at Boeing, San Diego, Phoenix, Tucson, Salt Lake City, San Jose, and Palmdale. Yeah, plus a couple of offices in Long Beach and LA. Good assignment. We recovered a lot of money out there from defense contractors. The latest estimate when I left was about over $250 million just in fines, that we had, plus the recoveries on overcharging. But it was a good assignment. Came back here in 99. I was a 15 then, so they had a colonel position here at Randolph, and they said, okay, you can fill that. So I was the vice commander for 3 years here at the region. And 26 detachments under us that we supervised. That's right after 2001, when the 9/11 took place. We had DLI here. DLI trains all the foreign students. And they wanted to know, they had the names of all the terrorists that was on those flights. We had to find out if any of them ever went through DLI, did any of them have any driver's license from Texas, the DLI students got driver's license. Anyway, we did that in like 48 hours. We had that done because they were looking for those so fast. And everybody cooperated, DLI, ATC, everybody was very, very supportive of us. Spent 3 years at that job. They wanted me to go to DC. I said, I don't think I want to go up there again. And they said, okay, you can take over the composite detachment where I had polygraphers, forensic scientists, computer crimes, forensics, the tech agents, and plus the detachment from the base. So I did that for the last 3 years and retired in 2005. It was a great career. I loved every minute of it. I could count the number of bad days on one hand. One was getting those bodies out of the B-52 in Guam. The worst day of all was notifying a mother, Diana Gonzalez, that her daughter had been shot and killed. That was the toughest. There's a few people I want to recognize. So, not only all the faculty, the friends, classmates, and just Somerset in general, but there's 3 people, Mr. James, Kenneth Taylor, and Mr. Bishop.
Mr. Bishop.
Time to take my pills. Yes, Klein, Mr. Bishop. Y'all remember Mr. Bishop?
Oh, yes.
I used to stay around whenever there was something going on after school. Normally I'd stay and I'd go move desks and tables and things for Mr. Bishop to sweep. He'd push that big broom around with that red sawdust. Mr. Bishop talked a lot. He had a lot of wisdom. He had a lot of wisdom. He had a lot of things he conveyed to me that I still remember. I respected that man like crazy. Mr. James probably had more influence on me other than my parents than anybody in Somerset. He was a great mentor. He taught me the value of motivating yourself, character, honesty, all the things you need to succeed in life. He taught all of us, didn't he?
Yes, amen.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say anything bad about Bill James. Kenneth Taylor was a Marine. He was a rough guy. He'd scared us to death the first day of class. But he had a single thing in mind, and that was to teach us. And he did a great job. He put me on the farm skills team we built a brooder for hatching chickens, or to put baby chicks under. Baby chicks, if you don't have them under a infrared light, they'll get red spots on them, and the other chicks will peck them until they kill them. So we had infrared lights in this brooder, and it turned them red, so they didn't have red spots. So the little chicks didn't peck each other. Quite innovative for that period of time. Anyway, that was our job, that was our project for this farm skills team. So I think the first competition was for CPS, they sponsored it. We won that. We went to Seguin, we won that. We went to San Marcos at Texas State Teachers College back then, Texas State College now, or University now. We won there. So the next stop was Sam Houston State in Huntsville. That was state competition. And we went up there and we did our thing and we came out third in state. That was the only time I ever saw Kenneth Taylor with a tear in his eye. He was so proud of Bobby Stamer, Buddy Martin, and myself. And Leon Smoot was our alternate, and he filled in. At one time I cut my finger and he had to step in while I bandaged up my thumb at one of them. And but that was, Kenneth Taylor he was so proud because he'd never got anybody to that point in the competitions. And not too much after that, as a sophomore, he had 10-acre plots of ground that he had got farmers to agree to let us plant oats in for a winter crop, oats and clover. And Alice Tyler Tractor Company provided the tractor. It was a huge diesel tractor. I mean, the biggest tractor I had ever seen. So he came to me and Leon and said, "Can y'all handle that tractor?" Both of us, "Yeah, we can handle it." So after school, we go out there, we learn everything we can about that tractor. And the next Monday, we started plowing and planting oats and clover. And it was, our pasture was one of them that we planted. It never had anything planted on it ever. And I'll tell you what, we had the best looking oats and clover in that patch that I'd ever seen. But anyway, Kenneth Taylor was good at creating the environment for you to learn in. And he treated you like one of his own. Him and Penny, his wife, both was really unbelievable people. I guess the last one, other than my wife, who's been the strongest supporter and pusher and taking care of the kids when I was gone, which is a lot.
He was gone a lot.
She sacrificed more than I did, I believe,
Yeah.
because they were a handful. But one person that I've admired and was my best friend from the time I guess I was about 3 or 4 years old was Leon Smoot. I mean, we were locked at the hip. I mean, he'd after school he'd come to our house and Mom would ask us, "Does your parents know where you are?" "Oh yeah." Well, it wouldn't be very long. Mr. Wilson would drop by and said, "Leon here," and he'd pick him up and take him home. But we were best buds throughout high school. He also went into EOD right after I did. He came home and he asked him where he'd been. He said, "I've been to a school in Maryland. I said, where in Maryland? He said, Indian Head. So I asked him about this bar that was right outside the gate. And he says, how do you know about that? So I went to it 3 months ago. So we were in the same job, doing the same thing except he was a full-time diver, hard hat diver and everything. But I tell you, Leon, all the way up to the day he passed, he was my best friend. And just having him and Carol and Randy and Aaron in our lives has been a big plus for us. Thank you, Carol. Any questions?
You mentioned Mr. Bishop. When I'm doing research, he turns out to be kin to Peggy and me. I don't know about anybody else here, but I know he's distant kin to Peggy and well, no, it's my daughter, not me.
Yeah.
My daughter. And it's the Bishop side. They have a Rutledge side.
Mm-hmm.
And so Peggy has a Rutledge side and so does my daughter. But I didn't know of that all those years growing up, that Mr. Bishop's mother was a Rutledge.
Yeah. He was Eunice Smith's brother.
Daddy,
Dad.
her daddy,
Yeah, it was her dad, yeah. He was Morsley's uncle.
Ye-
Or grandfather.
grandfather.
Yeah.
But he and his wife also attended church at Old Rock when I was growing up down there, when I was a child.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Mr. Bishop, and I'm like you, he was a nice man.
Oh, boy, he was. He was. We used to pull tricks on him once in a while, but he never got mad about it.
Well, that's
He took them
good.
all his stride.
You forgot to tell them we did not make it to Tehran.
Oh, yes, yeah, Tehran, we bought, they said, bring all the new appliances over here, because whenever you leave, you can get your money back on them. So don't bring what you got, get all new appliances. And, so we got them stored in our garage, waiting for the day for them to pick them up, and ship them over there. And just before they come to get it, that's when Tehran fell. That's when everybody had to evacuate, Tehran. And the OSI agents over there, it's a kind of a funny story in a way. Because they were struggling around trying to find a place to bury their guns and their badges, you know, where nobody would know who they were. And they didn't run to get on an airplane to get out of there. That's how quick they had to evacuate Tehran. So that's the reason I went to DC, to the headquarters, because that was the only place that left for me to, they could put me.
I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask him. First of all, Mr. Hicks, thank you for coming and
Yes,
letting us know the life you've lived in our service, so we're very thankful for that. One of the questions I have is, how many people were you over on that OSI in those other states? You said Oklahoma, many states. How many people?
At one time, Los Angeles was the biggest, had 70 agents out there. Here at the region, I supervised about 25, and then at the detachment here where I had all of the specialists, the police and forensic scientists and all of them, I had, when I retired, I had about 30 agents out there.
But what about when it was in all the other states? Did
Well,
you have
we
many
had-
more?
No, we covered, that was the largest units that I had, that existed really. Here at Randolph, we had more detachments. We had detachments in Colorado Springs Air Force Academy. We had the Air War College in Montgomery, Alabama. Had all the training bases. Had New York City. There was 26 different units. They had Cape Canaveral, had Vandenberg
Wow.
out on the West Coast. So they were spread pretty far. We did a lot of traveling. Me and Bob did a lot of traveling. Took turns
Okay.
going out to the.
The last question I have for you is, I'm intrigued by the when you were saying about frequencies and that the lowest frequencies that y'all didn't know about,
Mhm.
how many frequencies are there?
Oh, it goes from one cycle to infinity.
That's what I was
Okay.
thinking.
Light is a frequency.
Oh, didn't know that.
It's just in the frequency spectrum, your visible light goes from ultraviolet to infrared. You see everything in between, green being right in the middle of it. But it's frequencies.
Those are frequencies?
Yeah, they're measured there in the nanometers, 70 nanometers to 108 nanometers, something.
Well, we always hear that frequencies go through us, the radio frequencies.
Yes, they do.
And that's why I'm asking the question,
Yeah.
like, how many frequencies are there that's going through our body?
Well, you have,
But you're saying infinity?
yes, yes. We gotta get smaller and smaller and smaller, out to where they're not usable anymore. But you have low frequency, which is the lowest frequency for transmission for communications, they use for submarines, because it'll go through water. And it takes very large antennas. There's an antenna somewhere in Michigan, I haven't been there, but it's like 5 miles, I think, in diameter. And it's an antenna, and it sends a signal, low frequencies, through the earth.
So is that similar to what we're trying to send out into space?
No,
No?
those are higher frequencies.
Higher frequencies?
Yeah. We send everything, we send all kinds of frequencies into space. You have low frequency, then you have the high frequency, which is your radios, AM radios, FM radio, that's in the high frequency. And then you have the ultra high frequencies, which is radar and X-ray and things like that.
Wow.
Getting into frequencies up there.
I'm learning a lot today, so thank you.
But we normally, I'm not gonna say what frequency it was, but it was below what we normally look for.
Wow.
Because we had just bought new receivers, about 2 years before that. And I think they knew what the frequency range was on those receivers, so they put this down below it.
Thank you.
Did you ever work with the Civil Air Transport or Air America, any of those people?
No, they came through Guam when we were there, but I never did work with them.
Well,
When I was here at Randolph for the tech division, everybody, all the agents that we supported Oklahoma, New Mexico, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas. And all the agents in there, the thing that they wanted most was for us to be able to put cameras in someplace and videotape in the dark where there was no light. And we'd tell them, that's impossible. There's no equipment made that can do that. So the headquarters went out and bought a $12,000 camera that was supposed to be able to see in almost total darkness. So they sent it down to me, says, test this out and find out just how effective it is. So we did some tests with it, and it really didn't work out at all. But while we were doing that test, we had all the lights off in the lab, and we had a little cheap $130 camera, about that big square, little CCD camera. Had no filters on it or anything. And while we were videotaping this test that we were doing, we just set it back in the corner and watched what we were doing. And the lights on the VCR that we were recording with was just blooming like crazy with this little cheap camera. So after we get done, we noticed that. And a couple of agents, Randy Brown and Tom McAleer, this has already passed away here not too long ago, sharp guy. Anyway, that diode light lit up that camera. Let's get a diode that's not further out in the IR spectrum, that will just produce white light. And see if we can light up an area with it. Well, we tested that out. We started out with a radar detector. You know, the radar detectors used to go on the sun visor. We put a Banco in there and went out on a night drug buy where they were selling drugs on the corner of the street over in Louisiana. So we went over there and had that in there. Well, the guys would walk up to sell the drugs from the back end where the driver really couldn't see their face. Well, this thing lit them up like a studio. I mean, it was so clear. You thought it would be daylight. So from then on, we wrote a tech brief on it, sent it up to the headquarters. They distributed it out to the rest of the community. It wasn't but about 2 weeks later, we had every federal agency in existence down here. How did y'all videotape in the dark? So that was another breakthrough that was a big breakthrough to be able to fit, because we used it a lot. We used it. You could light up a room this big. All you had to do is just put little diodes, like LEDs, up, light up a room.
Bob, how about the ceremony at Medina Base that I had the privilege of observing? You didn't touch on that, did you?
No, I didn't. I retired in 2005, and in 2013, I think it was 2013, 14.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
I got a phone call from the general, the commander. Can you remember the general's name now? Anyway, he called me one day, just out of the blue. He says, "Bob," he says, "I just want to let you know you were just voted to be inducted into the Hall of Fame for OSI." And man, I was speechless. That was the biggest honor that I had ever had in my life. It was during a period where they couldn't hold the banquets. They normally held award banquets up in DC every year, but they weren't allowed to this year. So they had a conference down here at Lackland that they put together, I think mainly just where they could come down and do this award ceremony for me. But we had a huge crowd that showed up. You were there, I think Leon and Carol was there. And, Coach Martin was even there. Were you there, Karen? No. Buddy Martin was there. Anyway, a bunch of classmates and friends from Somerset was there. Plus every chief master sergeant in OSI was there. The chief master sergeant of the Air Force was there. The inspector general for the Air Force, the 3-star general that retired me, came in to it. But anyway, they officially inducted me here at Lackland in 2013, and that was a big honor. I'll tell you, that was a huge honor. And talk about shaky knees to get up and give a speech. That I was not prepared for. But,
You're on a wall up there in DC, aren't you? The Hall of Fame.
yeah, two walls.
I was thinking we need a big picture of you here. Did you receive your award?
It was a great career. Yeah, I mean,
It's just a good thing his wife was independent.
boy, you're not kidding.
Say so.
That's good.
She
I knew how to
ran,
handle everything.
she ran the house. She still don't let me have the checkbook.
No,
I've been doing it.
She don't even make out a bill and put it in an envelope and give it to me in a mail.
cause he don't mail them.
I carried the electric bill around in my briefcase for 2 months in Omaha.
A year.
Oh, a year.
You know, you should tell them too that, Leon ended up being, instructor at that EOD school.
Yes, he did. He turned out to be one of the instructors up there. They had instructors from all of the services, Marine Corps, Navy. Maybe the Air Force had most of them, but there was some Marines
And he had the diving locker, is what he had.
That was a tough school. That was a tough school.
Well, and I learned something when you talking about, you know how you guys are. I mean, he never I didn't realize you had to know of so many of around the world, different countries about those fuses and all that, I mean, he never said a lot
Well,
anyway.
to give you an example of why you needed to know them, like the Japanese use picric acid in their fuses. It turns to salt and it crystallizes, and you move it and it'll go off. So it's those the reasons why they teach that. Because when I was on call, I bet 3 to 4 times a week, we were making trips off the base over into the island in the jungle, picking up World War II ordnance.
Yeah.
That
Well, it's like he would have told you up there when we were in Virginia, going out,
Yeah.
all the pieces of ordnance from
For
World
Civil
War
War.
II. Yeah, all
The
those,
Civil War?
Yeah,
all different stuff.
Civil War, they use black powder. Black powder is not friendly. If it's kept dry.
People just don't think about what all's out there and is still out there,
Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
Well,
Yes.
I am just so impressed with the ladies and thank you, yeah, no fooling.
She was my husband's secretary.
Really?
Wow.
Precious, we had a lot of chats on the phone.
In fact, that year that in Germany, when he left and he was gone for a year and he just stopped by for a few hours, our oldest boy was turning 16. I said, he needs to be with his dad when he turns 16. So we're going to drive up to Ramstein. And I had a little Volkswagen. Half the time you put on the clutch and the darn thing would die on you. But anyhow, the boys and I took off. Foggy. It was so foggy you couldn't see. And the Germans were passing me up like, well, we missed our exit. So we made a big turn, come right back, went through Frankfurt and back down to Wiesbaden. And I said, well, boy, and we didn't have phones then either. I said, boys, do we go or do we just go home and wait for Dad to call? No, Mom, you're fun to get lost with. You don't get mad. So we took off and we made it.
I gotta salute the wives, the
More.
people. I mean, it's been well said.
Yeah.
If you have not seen the movie, it's a Mel Gibson movie, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. It tells you what the wives have to go through, wondering if that next cab is going to have a message about her husband. I mean, that was during the Vietnam conflict,
Right.
of course, but that's true for every wife that's in the military.
Well, look what the
and her
wives have to
husband
go
is
through
deployed.
now. Well, the ones that went to Afghanistan, their husbands, and Iraq, and they've really had it rough with their husbands coming back with a lot of issues and missing limbs and
Yeah, they're the real
so
heroes.
yes.
Well, every war had these people that, it's just these recent people that get any kind of notoriety about it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 50 or 100 Vietnam veterans that kill themselves every day.
Yes,
And nobody's talking about that.
because they're not getting help.
And-
Well, like on Guam, him and two of his teammates, somebody had told you all this. There was a bomb back there in the boonies, right? And they come carrying out. Each one had one from World War II.
There was 3 of us, and we had 5 40-pound
Yeah.
barrage rockets, so
Got a picture of them.
we had 2 apiece most of the time, and we got lost. We walked in, we went right straight to them, but when we started coming out, we got lost. And we fought for about 3 times as far as we did going in, because you couldn't tell just the directions. The jungle is so thick.
But weren't they still alive?
Oh yeah.
So they could have went on. Yeah.
Based on what he was talking about of having something for the veterans to do, my oldest brother was working at Lockheed at the start of the war. He tried to join the Navy to be a pilot, but because of his position at Lockheed, they said, no, stay there. Okay, after the war was over, he came home to try to do his best to farm nearby, small acreage and everything. He wasn't here very long before he was approached to see if he would like to teach the veterans when they come back. And those that try to find positions, what they want, those that were interested in farming, ranching, dairying, this kind of stuff, he got those people here. He taught them for 14 years, you know, as they come in and get through and everything. He ended up having similar schools in about 8 or 9 surrounding counties. Dob James started his dairy because of what he learned in that school.
Wow.
And a lot of the other people did. Of course, my brother was, he was a technician in aircraft manufacturing. They pumped out something like 33 fighter planes and bombers a day at Lockheed.
Yep.
There's a lot to say about that. But when he came back and they formed that up, it was a great thing for the people.
Yes.
They didn't know what they want to do, but they know they was interested in agriculture some way. They found their niche, and
all the investigations that we did on defense contractors, Lockheed was head and shoulders above everybody else in honesty and productivity. I mean, they did what they were paid to do. Boeing was right behind them, but Lockheed was.
you know, a lot of interesting story. There's acres and acres of parking lot and factories and buildings and everything. They got chicken wire and sprayed it with some kind of adhesive stuff and sprayed it over top the parking lots, the buildings and everything, and then sprinkled feathers on it.
Long Beach,
So when
California.
you see it from the air, you can't see it.
Looked like an orchard.
Looks like an orchard or looks like the mountains or
The
something.
one in Long Beach, California looked like an orchard. But it was a huge factory.
You know, of course, my brother, to save money, he would drive his car to work, he rode a bicycle
Yeah.
to save his gas stamps.
Yeah.
And so where did your brother do that teaching? Here in Somerset?
I think it started about somewhere around 45 or 47, I think.
No, where
When
did he
World War
do?
II veterans played out, the Korean veterans started
Did you?
starting in it.
Did you do it here in Somerset?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one of the last buildings to be torn down over here is the parking lot right now. It was the agricultural building where they had their classes and stuff.
All right.
But then he had classes, Pleasanton, Poteet, and all over the place.
Well, that's wonderful.
Fantastic, yeah.
Wonderful to hear.
Yes.
Look, you know, I don't discourage people going to college, but there's a lot of people that are not cut out for college. I
Need a good trade school.
thought I was one of them, and I didn't go to college. And the job that I had never allowed me to go to college at night. So when I retired, I was the only one in my shop that didn't have a degree, and I was running the shop. So, but you self-taught, you learn, you're put in positions that you have to learn. And if you're willing to learn, you can learn anything. There is nothing a person can't learn if they want to learn.
You know, you talk about that janitor he was or whatever, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Bishop.
Bishop. And how you learned so much from him.
Just by sitting and listening to him after school.
Yeah, my dad was a Marine, okay, and in regular life, he loved to teach people. He loved the young man that would want to learn something. But when one of them didn't want to learn, he was just like so disappointed. It's like, you don't want to learn?
One of the things that the last 3 years that I did, I was on it was 3 of us that we taught leadership and management to all the senior officers in OSI, the senior officers and senior civilians, GS-14s and above and lieutenant colonels and above. We taught leadership and management to every one of them.
You know,
And they later on, after I retired, I used to get emails from them saying how much they learned in that 14 days.
With my job that I had at the language school, I got to meet a lot of people from a lot of countries. It was interesting when the Egyptian general said that once they retire, they don't usually last for about 2 or 3 years because they were so used to being boss,
Yeah.
they didn't know how to make a living anymore.
Right.
But how they coped with that, and it helped cure it some, is they gave them a desk to where they used to work, and they could come back and forth every day until they felt like they were okay.
Interesting, that's good.